In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to install these LED accent ring lights in your center console cup holder. These are something that were only found on the Sport and Platinum package Explorers. So if you have a base model or an XLT, or if you're like me, in this vehicle we have a console that was swapped into my Police Interceptor utility, this is applicable for you. The color of the light is the ice blue, the same ice blue that is found on your controls and on your speedometer, and it's tied into the ignition power, so whenever I turn my key on, it just comes on with it. So this kit that I'm using is one that I actually make myself. It can be found on 3w200.com, and all it is an LED that sandwiches in between the cup holder and the actual console, so there's no real modifications needed, no drilling or anything like that on the actual console. So there's two options when you're buying this kit. You can either just get the light itself and wire it up yourself, or you can get the electronics component kits. That's going to come with all the wiring, all the terminals already crimped, and then the dimmer switch and the buck converter to adjust the voltage so you can fine-tune the brightness of these ring lights. And then I have my dimmer switch installed right in the pocket right there, so that we can adjust or turn off this at any time. So the other thing you're going to want to consider is what year your console came from. So if you're doing this on a Police Interceptor utility, it doesn't matter what year your vehicle is, it matters what year the console came from. So this is from a 2013. Now if you're doing this in a regular Explorer, from 2011 to 2015, this is the kind of panel that it looks like. So there's this bridge in between the cup holders. Whereas if you have a 2016 to a 2019, they eliminated this bridge and it's just an open gap through here. So this particular ring light assembly that we're showing on this video is not the right one for 2016 to 19, but I will soon have one available on the same listing on my website. So just keep your eye open for that. So let's go ahead and get started. So first thing we need to do is take out our console panel here. The first thing you do is you pop off this cover, which obviously I've already done most of this. Pop off this cover, and then right here, going into there, is a 7mm bolt. So you take that guy out. At this point, everything's just held in with clips. So I took a trim tool and fit my way in there and pried out all of the clips like this. And then I was able to grab right here and pop up. Now, I don't need my phone holder for this, so we're going to take out the phone holder and we'll remove the pocket. We can take this pocket out too. And then we can pull out our console, but it will probably be held in with the electrical here. So I've already loosened up this. This is the light that goes in for the pocket. And then there is a little switch here that just pulls off. It slides onto that shaft. And then if you have any other electronics or anything, you just pull them out. If you have this console shifter, like on all the commercial Explorers, after you get this lifted up, you have to release the actual shifter from the shifter shaft. And so what that's going to look like is you're going to peel this boot up, and you're going to find two Phillips screws holding it on. So you just undo those two Phillips screws, and then this will lift up and off. And so once you have this worked all the way out, we can take it somewhere with a better workstation because we're going to be dismantling it. So with a good surface to work on, we're going to take our console and flip it upside down. And this one, of course, has had the shifter removed quite a while ago, since this is out of an Interceptor. But these cup holders are held in with a series of T20 Torx bolts. So we're going to take our driver, and we're just going to go around and remove each of them. So this is our LED that we're going to be installing. You'll notice that the forward hole is a little bit smaller than the rear hole, so this has to be lined up in the right orientation. This is our forward. You can tell it's slightly smaller. The other thing is, if you look at this, there is notches. It's kind of hard to tell with this lighting, but it is notched out here and here to meet the same contours of this bend in the upper. So it can only fit one way. If it's not fitting quite right, you probably have it on the wrong way. So you're going to flip it over and you're going to have the LEDs showing, and then the plug is going to be going inwards, so towards the chrome trim, the rectangular chrome trim. And when you set it in, it kind of snaps into place, but it's not super sturdy. And that is because if you look at the way this cup holder is, there's actually curvature to it. It kind of is concave on the inside. And because of that, it's really difficult to mirror. So this assembly is light enough that when you bolt it down, it will slightly contour and bend to meet the contour of this. So that's something to keep in mind. It's not going to look really good until you start to really fasten everything down, and then it's going to all fit into place. So with our chrome ring installed, you're going to want to make sure you have this ring installed as well, because it acts as kind of a washer almost on a couple of these tabs. So if you don't have those and you start screwing down, you're going to actually poke through the backside and ruin your panel. So you want to make sure all these chrome trim pieces are present. So we're going to go ahead and set this with the right orientation, which is like that. And then this is where it can get a little tricky. So open up your bag of the 6 round spacers. Because we're adding, it's about 10 millimeters of depth of thickness to this. Because we're adding that, we have little spacers to help us, essentially standoffs, to help with the additional height as well, so we're not bending the tabs down. So we're going to start off by making sure that our plug is somewhere kind of like that, where it's not going to get buried. And then we're going to just set, now not every single one of these gets a spacer, but most of them do. So this one doesn't get one, and that one doesn't get one. But this one gets one. This is the hardest one to install because it wants to slide out and run away on you. Some of these are probably going to slide out and you're going to have to reposition them. But it's going to go just like that. And then once again, this little wire will want to hide. But you just want to get it somewhere that we can access it. Okay, just like that. And it's not going to look like it's going to fit real good until we start getting these screws into place, which will align everything. So we're going to take our Torx and we're just going to slightly start them and making sure that you're going through your spacers, that they're not walking off the edge. Okay. So we've got our plug hanging right here. We can get to it real easy. This one doesn't have a spacer, but it doesn't really need one. Once you tighten it down, you'll see it's not as necessary. So we're going to want to align, make sure that our cup holder is aligned. You can reach underneath the underside of your cup holder and just kind of align it by hand and make sure it's kind of flush. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be really close. So then you can start tightening these down. Don't go crazy tightening these down. They're not real load bearing. They don't need to be crazy tight. You don't want to crack anything. And then I'm just putting my hand in here and making sure that the rings that we just installed are lined up and they feel good. And then make sure that our plug is still accessible, which it is right there. So now if we flip over, we're going to want to make sure that our cup does look aligned, our cup holder ring. And if it's not, this one is pretty good. If it's not, it's as simple as loosening up some of these Torx slightly, realigning it with your hands so it feels good, and then tightening them back down. Now it's not going to be perfectly flush. There'll be like maybe a 1 millimeter lip. That's actually how it is, even if you have the sport model that has these from the factory. You can feel a bit of a lip in there. That's normal. So you'll notice how it's really, as we squished it down, as we sandwiched it together with the Torx, it kind of made this contour of the ring that's molded around the factory panels. So this is exactly what you want. All you need for the rest of the install is your dimmer switch if you decided to use one. I would highly recommend using a dimmer switch because these LED lights are going to be extremely bright and almost blinding at nighttime if you don't have them dimmed down. So you can, find your own dimmer switch or install an inline resistor, whatever you want if you didn't want to go the route with the dimmer switch that I offer. But if you did want to get the one that I offer, this is it. And so it comes in an enclosure, and then you would just use this double-sided tape to stick it somewhere. This is really strong double-sided tape. It's intended to install inside of this pocket right up underneath the cigarette lighter. And so, but you could install it anywhere. You don't even have to have it somewhere where it's accessible. You could have it tucked down inside the console and you just adjust it to where you want it before you install it. But I would highly recommend some way of dimming this unless you just want an extremely bright light. If you're planning on mounting your dimmer switch inside underneath the cigarette lighter, inside of the pop-up pocket, you're probably going to want to take this time before you take it back outside to drill a hole for the access for the wires. If you drill up on the top of this part, you're not going to notice it from the inside. And this is just going to be a pass-through for your access wires to come through to plug into your dimmer. So I already have a hole drilled for when I was running my aux, if you look back at my aux Bluetooth video. But this would be a good time to drill a hole. It doesn't need to be huge, just big enough for some wires to get through. The other thing you're going to need is the harness that comes with the kit. So this will plug into the LED, and then these are these little terminals which will plug into the back of your dimmer switch. These are what the ends look like if you purchase the option with the dimmer switch. They have these little terminals crimped on there. And if you didn't, it's just going to be two tinned wires that are ready to be stripped a little further and then soldered or crimped onto a circuit somewhere. So you're going to have to do a little bit more DIY if you go without the dimmer switch. But you're going to have to go splice some wires to pull your power from anyway. But let's go out to the vehicle and finish this off. All right, so now we're back to the car. It's a little bit of a rat's nest in here, even though I have gone through previously and installed this fuse box and kind of done some cable management. So I know what I'm looking at, but if this is your first time seeing my setup, the mess that it is, it's kind of organized chaos. So I have gone ahead and added in a fuse box, which if you do this is going to make life a lot easier for adding any of this kind of accessory stuff. This fuse box, I have a whole video on it. You can go back and watch it, but pretty much when the ignition is on, there's power to this fuse box. So each of these tap-offs are going to be ignition power. Now you see I already have this one labeled interior lights, and I already have this hooked up for, I used to have a different interior light system in here. And so now I'm switching it out for one that's a little bit more clean. Now what I do have this hooked up to is, if I turn my ignition on, you'll see that I have it hooked up with the harness that came with the cup holders and like the whole center console anyway. With it, this is the little light that would plug into the shifter indicator, like the letters like the drive, reverse, neutral. And then this is what goes into that little cubby up there. And this is the switch that controls it. Now we removed these at the beginning of the video. This also powers the lights for inside of the storage underneath the armrest. Now I have this hooked up, so if you watch, if I pull this orange fuse, it's going to turn them off, right? So that's what I'm going to be tapping off of. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to I have these two wires that are going to be the power to my dimmer switch. So I just grabbed two wires. I probably wouldn't go much smaller than 20 gauge. And I've put two terminals on the end here. You don't have to have these exact terminals, but I like these for this style of dimmer switch, which I'll show you here in a second. And I just left kind of a long bit of wires. I'll trim these down once we know exactly how long they need to be. So, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these in shrink tube. I'm going to pull this out of here. I'm going to put these in shrink tube, and then once I know how long it needs to be, and then that way it'll make it more of a harness that's kind of nice and tight together rather than these wires that are just going to be hanging out loose in there. Okay, so this is our dimmer switch. So this is what we're going to be wiring up next. If you pull off the dial, the knob, and then you just push on the shaft, it'll pop out. It's a snug fit. And this is what you're going to see. If you look at it closely, you'll see it has these 4 terminals, which hook in right there, and then they're fastened in with these little screws. So what we're going to do is take a screwdriver, and we're going to loosen each of these up so we have plenty of space to get our terminals in there. And then we need to figure out which goes where. And it has little icons, little lettering to let us know which goes where. So we've got our power in and then our power out. So we got a positive in and negative out. And then our output in, output out. So pretty much the power is going to be coming in here. And this is just raw switch power. And then the dimmer is going to be, this is really just a voltage regulator more than a standard potentiometer. So as you turn this knob, it's going to adjust the output of the power, which is going to come out here, to our dimmer switch. And then this is just the negative for the input power. So pretty much we're going to have our dimmer hooked up to the inner ones, and then just the regular ignition power from our fuse box or whatever wire you decide to tap in, hooked up on the outer ones. Now, if you have a regular Explorer that's not a police interceptor, and you don't have all this space in here to install fuse boxes, and you don't want to go crazy with it, all you need to do is find some wiring that is hooked up to your ignition that will power, that you can use. But if you have these, which you should have these hooked up already, you can just tap into these wires. Because, just looking at this one that goes to your indicator for your shifter, this purple is going to be your positive and this brown is going to be your negative. So you could just tap into these if you don't want to mess with anything else. Just tap into these. That's if you have a regular Explorer. If you have an Interceptor and you swapped this console in, unless you went and manually hooked these up like I already have, these, you could tap into these, but they're not going to do anything. So it's not super intuitive. If you've messed around with electronics, it's not too bad, but you may have to get a little creative and play around with it to figure out what you're going to do. If you don't have anything in here hooked up, I would go back, and if you have an Interceptor, I would go back and watch my video on hooking this up on the fuse box. It's on my channel, and then you'll see how to set that up. Anyway, let's get back to installing the actual dimmer switch. And so we need to have first off, our power coming in from our ignition. So we're going to take our wires here, and these are going to be going up and then back into the dimmer switch. So I'm taking these 2 wires that are going to be ran, and I'm just going to make kind of a mini harness by using this 1/4-inch shrink tube. I picked this up at Harbor Freight. It's just really cheap shrink tube that will work for this. Okay, so I went ahead and shrinked just about, 6 to 8 inches of this, and so this is ready to feed up. I've left all of this unshrunk, and then this wire is really long just because I will be trimming it down, but I'm not quite sure how long yet. So we're going to reintroduce our panel here, and we're going to open that up, and then through the hole that we talked about earlier, I'm just going to feed these 2 wires and then pull them through so we have somewhere to work on them, which is right here. Okay, so we have our wire sticking out here, coming out, going in the back, and then we take our harness with the 2 terminals that we're going to be using for our ring lights, and we are going to install them the exact same way. So we're just going to put them in through here and then pull it out somewhere we have some space to work on it. So now we can hook up our dimmer switch. So with our dimmer switch, we remember that we had our power in, which is going to be from going to our fuse box. So let's start with our inners because they're going to be easier to do. So these are going to our ring lights. These are going to our fuse box. So output positive. Okay, so that's exactly what you want to see. Something like that. Now I used these nice crimp terminals. I will link the kit that I used in the description for these kind of terminals. They're really great if you're using little circuit board connectors like this. But you could just strip off and tin a little bit of your wires and then put them in there. There's more than one way to skin a cat. But just make sure that you don't have any of these terminals touching each other. And so you don't have too much exposed wire sticking out. And then also your power in, make sure it's fused. So if you don't have a visible fuse, I have my fuse box, but if you don't have a visible fuse, make sure that you put an inline fuse or something, because you do not want this to accidentally melt down or something like that, which it shouldn't, but you never really know. So it's just good practice to make sure that you have a fuse. So now we can put it back in its box, and this box has a little shelf that it sets on, just like that, so it protects the terminals down here, these little pins. And so it just slides right in through there, and then it comes with a little washer. And this is like if you were going to drill a hole in the panel somewhere, which you could do. You could drill a hole, but I'm just going to be using the double-sided tape. There's actually a lot of places you could mount this switch. I just wanted to make it as easy as possible with as minimal modification as possible. So we'll put that on, and then I'm going to orient. So it's going to be going in like this. So I want my dimmer switch to be, for me, like off down here and then on and like that. So I'm going to orient it like that. I'll push this down. Now we can mount this. So all you do is pull off your double-sided tape, just like that. Now this may be kind of difficult to show, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to start pulling the slack out of my wiring back here and feeding my dimmer switch in and making sure my wires aren't getting all twisted and tangled. So now we have our dimmer switch mounted right here, and I can turn it on and turn my dimmer switch as needed. So we're just going to turn it off. We can close this, and then we're going to make sure our slack is pulled out. So this is the plug going to our LED ring. So we're going to have to route this, and what I recommend is taking some electrical tape. We're just going to tape it down so it doesn't get snagged and hung up while we're trying to install it. This tape doesn't even need to hold it that well, just well enough that we can get everything installed back in. This is some kind of cheaper electrical tape I'm using, so it's probably going to lift to some degree. But we've got it routed like that, and I'm just going to route it kind of along here and then up to our plug, which is right there. Okay, so we have our wire. So we have our harness that comes up out of the hole, over to the side, down the side, and then comes over and plugs in right to our LED ring. So we are done with the wiring on this part. So now we need to figure out how long this wire needs to be that goes to our fuse box. So it's better to have extra wire and then trim it shorter if needed. So I'm going to go ahead and say that we're going to need about that much. So you're just going to have to eyeball it yourself. So I'm just going to cut it. So now we'll wire up our fuse, or our ignition power from our fuse box. All right, and then we will reinstall our cover. Okay, so we should have everything hooked up. This would be a good time to test it. Now, before we get everything put together too much, we're going to turn it on the car and test that these are working, which they are. And then we're going to want to check this is the right dimness and brightness that we want. So this is in the fully dimmed down setting. Now, if I turn this up, you'll see how bright it gets. Now, that's kind of unrealistically bright. They're really bright LEDs. And so this is the dimmest that this dimmer will allow, because if I turn it down anymore, it'll just turn it off. So I actually want to make these even more dim, and so I'm going to install a buck converter or a DC voltage regulator. And they're really inexpensive, but I'll show you if you want to go the extra step to really fine tune the brightness of this. What you're going to do is you're going to take this back off, and then we're going to install a buck converter. So this is what's referred to as a buck converter. It's a voltage downstep regulator kind of little chip. So pretty much you have two terminals, one on this side and then one on this side, and they each have 2 ports. And so if you read down in the little corners here, it says in positive, in negative, out positive, out negative. So just kind of, it's pretty intuitive. How this is going to work is we're going to have our power coming in through these ports, which, you know, is going to be about 12 volts coming from the vehicle. And then we're going to adjust with this little brass screw right up here. And we're going to be able to adjust the voltage like that. And it will give a readout on this screen. And then the adjusted output voltage will come out here. And this is going to allow us to further manipulate the voltage going to our LED lights. So we're going to be able to have the real brightness we want. And we use this screw to kind of calibrate the range of our dimmer switch so we can really control the overall brightness. But that will make a little bit more sense as we get a little further. So all we're going to do is hook up first. We're still pulling our ignition power from this fuse box, but instead of going straight to the dimmer switch, this is going to be in between the fuse box and the dimmer switch. So I'm going to, these are my terminals are going to my fuse box that we already used. I just cut this loom that we already had in half and then put these ferrule connectors on it. So we're just going to slide so we got our out positive. So as a reminder, what we've got is our power coming from our ignition or the fuse box, and it's coming through here. We're going to change it down to about 10 volts is the sweet spot I found. And then it's going to exit as 10 volts here. And then it's going to be going to our dimmer switch. We'll be able to adjust it even more. So let's go ahead and hook this up to the fuse box. So when you look at this, you're going to see that there is, it's going to say, you know, we know it's 12 volts coming in. It might bounce around like 19.9 or whatever, or 11.9 or whatever. So then there's this little button right here. And so if we push that button, it's going to change so that the LED switched. So now it's saying, so that's what we have coming in. And then this is what we have going out. So right now we've got 11.9 coming in, which is about right for a car that's not running. And then right now we have it set for 12. So we're going to adjust the 12 down to 10. And the way you do that is this little brass screw right here. And so you turn it clockwise to turn it up and counterclockwise to turn it down. Now, depending on where the position of the screw is, you may turn this and turn this and turn this and turn this and nothing's going to happen until after a while it will start making a difference. That's because these pull such little voltage, these LEDs, that it's not going to notice a real difference. And then also these converters can handle like, I think it's like 38 volts or more. So if it's turned in the middle position, you're going to be in a higher range than you even have coming in. So pretty much you just need to turn this thing counterclockwise a lot before it starts making a difference. Now I'm going to turn mine to about, I guess 10.4, somewhere between 10 and 10.4. Maybe we'll do 10.2 right there. And now the beauty of this thing is you can always come back and adjust it. And that's all you have to do. And so then we're going to take our little cover and snap it on. And this will automatically come on with the vehicle now. So if I turn it off and turn it back on, it's going to be right where we left it. So now we got our top panel back in. It's a good idea to calibrate our dimmer switch so we get exactly the right range of brightness adjustment from our LED. So we're going to turn on the ignition. And then, so right now you can already see how much dimmer it is, and it is bright outside right now. So I'll come back and show you what this is gonna look like after it's all finished. But this is a lot dimmer than it was. And so this is on the lowest setting. If I turn it any more, it turns it off. And then if I turn it any more, it gets brighter. Now, so let's go ahead and turn it to, I turned my dimmer switch all the way down to the lowest setting. And now you can see in there, I've got my buck converter right in there, and I've got it set. It looks like it's at 10.4. So with our dimmer switch in the bottomed out position, not off, just barely on. And then I can adjust our little brass screw, and you see as I turn it up clockwise, the LED is getting brighter and brighter. And that's about as bright as it was before we adjusted or installed the buck converter. So I found that the sweet spot, if you go below 10.4, weird stuff starts to happen with like flickering and stuff. So I found that 10, you can go down to 10, but I like 10.4, somewhere in there. And now, as we turn up our dimmer switch, you see it gets brighter, and that's about as bright as you're going to want it on the high end. And when it's a little darker, I'll turn it off. When it's a little darker, it will look a lot better. So I'll come back out here in a minute when it's getting dark right now. All right, so it's nice and dark outside, so we're going to turn on our ignition and see how well this brightness is. So this is on the lowest setting, which I think is a pretty close match to the brightness of the instruments and the control panel and everything. And here it is with the lights off. Now, once again, if I decide that I want to dim this down anymore, I can just pop out my pocket here and then get down and turn down my buck converter a little bit. So, and then of course I've got my dimmer switch in here. So if I want to go brighter, there's the max brightness, and then there's off. And so I'm just going to leave it on the lowest right there. Then of course it's just going to turn off with all my, with my key. So hopefully this is helpful. Thanks for watching.